Welcome back. In our previous video, we have seen how we can use the select star command to return all the rows and all the attributes from a given table. Now, in this video, we'll examine how to return only a subset of the attributes or columns of a particular table. We're going to use the select command again, and the format of the variation of the select command is the following. Again, select from table, so the basic structure remains the same. However, instead of using star, we're going to use a list of the attributes in a comma-separated manner for the attributes that we want to show in the results. So we write, for example, select, then attribute 1, comma, attribute 2, comma, attribute 3, and so on, and then from table, which table is the table that we want to query. Let's take a look at a few examples. So first, let's connect to the IMDb database, which we're going to use for our example. So use IMDb, we connect to the database, and our first example is let's get the first and the last name of the actors. So let's start with a query that we know, select star, right? So select star from actors. We execute this command and we get back the results that we have seen before. The list of actors, the ID, first name, last name, and gender. Right now, we don't want to get all the columns. Instead, we want to see only the first name and the last name of the actors. So we're going to modify our query and we write select from actors. And now, instead of specifying star, we write that we want the first name, select first name, comma, last name from actors. Also remember to put the semicolon at the end. We execute, and now you can see that we get back only two columns with the first and last names of the actors. So we have Michael, Baby Power, Vieira, Eloy, Cinzetta, and so on. Now, let's do another example. So let's say that from the movies table, we don't want to get back everything, but we want to see just the year and the ranking of the movies. Again, let's start with the basic query, select star from movies. Again, this query returns back all the movies and all the attributes. We want to modify this select star query and get back just the year and the rank. So we go back and we say instead of select star, select year, comma, rank from movies. We execute this query and you will see that we get back just the two columns that we specified, year and rank, and the corresponding rows from that table. Let's switch database and let's go to the Facebook database instead. So use Facebook, we switch to the Facebook database, and we want now to run a query. Instead of retrieving everything from the profiles table, we want to get back just the name, sex, and birthday of the students, right? So we go, let's start with a basic select query, select star from profiles, we execute, and we get back the table with quite a few attributes. Actually, you see it's a very big table, and in reality, actually, most database tables tend to look like the profiles table. Many real-life databases contain tables that have tens or even hundreds of attributes sometimes, so quite often we want to filter out this table and our query to get back just the attributes that we care about. So in this particular case, we want to get back name, sex, and birthday, as I will say. So we go select, and we replace now star with name, comma, sex, comma, birthday from profile. So make sure that the capitalization of the attributes is proper. In that case, MySQL tends to be capital sensitive. We execute the query and we get back all the rows of the table, but we only get back the three columns that we specify. Now, a little bit of a side note, if you're using MySQL Workbench to run your queries, you will see that when we write the attribute name and the table profiles, both of them, they get colored in blue. You can actually ignore this peculiar coloring. This happens because name and profiles are also SQL functions, and MySQL Workbench is not smart enough to know to distinguish between a table name, attribute name, and function name. So if a table or an attribute has the same name as a function, it automatically colors these names as blue. Again, closing the side note, you can ignore this peculiar coloring. Now, let's go and run another query. So we want to get back the sex and political views of all students. So how can we do that? We go and we type select sex, political views from profiles. We execute the query and we get back the two columns, sex and political views, for all the students. Let's move and see another variation of the select command, in particular the as command. So we learn how we can get specific columns out of a particular table. Sometimes when we do that, the different names of the columns are not very descriptive. So we may want to use a select attribute, then space as, and then an alias for this column, and use this order to rename the column in the results of the query. So for example, let's say that we want to get back the ID, first and last name of the actors from the IMDb database. So let's go to the IMDb database, use IMDb, and we type select ID, first name, last name from actors. And we get back the results. Now, let's say that ID is not very descriptive and we want to change the ID to be called actor_ID. So to achieve that, we modify the query by adding as actor ID after the ID attribute, and our query now is select ID as actor ID, first name, last name from actors. So when we execute the query, now the ID column in the results is called actor ID. One thing, notice that if we go back and check the columns of the actors table in the database, the name of the attribute ID in the actors table doesn't change. In the table that is stored in the database, the ID column remains as ID. It is not changed to actor ID. Only in the results of the query, the ID column is renamed to actor ID, again, not in the original table. Now, let's do one more example. We want to go to the movies table and we want to get back the year and the rank of the movie. And we also want to rename the column rank to rating because it's more descriptive. So we start and we type the select star from movies query. However, we want to get back only the year and the rank, so we modify the select star query to select year, rank from movies. Now, finally, we want to rename rank to rating, so we modify the query and write select year, rank as rating from movies. And we get back the year and the rating for the movie, and notice in the results that the name of the rank column is called rating right now. Now, let's go to the Facebook database for one more example. So switch to the Facebook database, use Facebook, enter, and we want to get the column sex and status for all the students from the profiles table. So we go and type select sex, status from profiles. We execute and we get back two columns that show the sex of the students and their status. However, we do not like the name of the columns and we want to change sex to gender and rename status to university status. So for that, we go and modify our query and we write select sex, but now instead of having sex, we say as gender, then status, but we also add as university status. We continue from profiles, and now we get back the same results, but the columns are called gender and university status in the results. So notice, since we do not have a profile ID, many rows are identical in the results of this query and duplicate values are not eliminated from the result. In our next video, we'll learn how to eliminate duplicate entries. Now, what have we done in this video? We have learned how to specify which columns we want to retrieve from a table, and we also learned how to rename the name of a column in the results of a query. Next time, we are going to see how we can eliminate duplicates. Until then, play around and practice. See you next time.